Our story begins on a night in January. The great hall of Ashby Manor was full. Candles were lit. Flowers were arranged. The guests wore their finest clothes. It was an engagement night. Everyone knew it. Everyone expected it. Eleanor Vane stood in the hall. Beside her was Miles Ashby, the Duke's cousin, a small box in his hand. The room fell silent. Miles opened the box. A ring shimmered inside. Eleanor looked at the ring. Her face was blank. Her eyes were blank. No one could see what was inside her. Miles reached out his hand, and in that moment, the door opened. The hall froze. The man who stepped in was pale. There were marks on his face, marks of war, of time, of exhaustion. His clothes were not proper. His hair had grown long. But those eyes, Eleanor knew those eyes. Robert. The hall stood still. Miles stood still. Eleanor stood still. And Robert Ashby, Duke of Caldwell, the man believed dead, waited for 2 years, mourned, grieved, looked around that room. He looked at Eleanor. He looked at Miles beside her. He looked at the ring in his hand. And something passed through his eyes. Shock, pain, and anger. Stop. That's as far as I've told it. Now we go back. 2 years earlier, to where everything began. Because to understand this story, you have to know how it started. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Back then, Eleanor Vane was 22. Robert Ashby was 26. They were engaged. A strong, well-established, loving engagement between two families. Eleanor loved Robert. Robert loved Eleanor. London society looked at them and said, "What a beautiful couple." And everything was good. Until the news came. Robert arrived one morning. Eleanor was in the garden. She saw him. There was something on his face. Serious. Heavy. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. Robert sat beside her, took her hand. "War," he said. "I have to go." Eleanor didn't speak. She just tightened her grip on his hand. "When?" she asked. "In 2 weeks." 2 weeks. 14 days. Those 2 weeks are hard to describe, because they knew everything. He would leave. It would be dangerous. No one knew when he would return. And still, they woke up every morning. They ate. They talked. They laughed. What else could they do? On the last night before he left, Robert turned to Eleanor. "Will you wait for me?" Eleanor looked at him. "Yes." "Promise?" "Promise." Robert smiled. That familiar, warm smile. "I promise too," he said. "I'll come back." He left early in the morning. Eleanor stood at the door, watching him. Did Robert turn back? Yes. Once. He waved. Eleanor waved back. Then the carriage turned. And he was gone. 6 months passed. Letters came. Irregular. Delayed. Sometimes incomplete. But they came. Robert wrote. Eleanor wrote. That's how 6 months passed. Then the letters stopped. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Eleanor counted. Every morning when she woke up, she counted. At the end of the 4th week, there was a knock at the door. A formal man stood there, an envelope in his hand. Eleanor took it, opened it, read. She read it once, twice. Then she let it go. The paper fell to the floor. Eleanor didn't pick it up. She stayed where she was. What did she feel? Nothing. At first, nothing. Then, everything. Her mother came in, saw it, picked up the paper, read, and cried. Eleanor did not cry. Not that day. Not that night. 3 days later, alone in her room at midnight, she cried, and for a long time she couldn't stop. There was something else in those days. Eleanor knew. She had known for 2 weeks, but she hadn't told anyone, because she was going to tell Robert. In a letter. In the next letter. That letter was never sent, because the news had come first. She was pregnant. She was carrying Robert's child. And Robert was gone. Eleanor sat for a long time that night. In a dark room, a fading candle beside her, her hands in her lap. Pregnant. Alone. Her fiancé dead. No one knew. Her mother didn't know. Her family didn't know. What am I going to do? There was no answer. Morning came. Eleanor stood up, washed her face, went downstairs. And that day, Miles Ashby came to the door. Miles Ashby cried at the funeral. Everyone saw it. No one questioned it. Robert's cousin. They had grown up together. Or at least, that's what people said. Miles was always there. In Robert's shadow, a little behind. But there. He was there that day, too. Black clothes, head bowed, a handkerchief in his hand. He came to Eleanor, took her hand. "I'm so sorry," he said. His voice trembled. Eleanor didn't lift her head. She only nodded. Miles stayed. For a long time. But understand this. At that funeral, while Miles's eyes were full of tears, they were also fixed somewhere else. On the Caldwell title. On the Caldwell lands. On the Caldwell fortune. Robert was gone. There was no heir. And Miles was the closest relative. Everything could pass to him. If there was no obstacle. That obstacle was Eleanor. But Miles didn't know that yet. Not yet. In the first month, Miles came every week. Visits, support, observation. He spoke with Eleanor's mother, with the family. Difficult days. I'm here for you. Tell me if you need anything. When Eleanor saw him, she was polite. She had no energy for anything else. At the beginning of the second month, Miles noticed something. Eleanor's silhouette was changing, just slightly. But Miles was a careful man. He saw it. And that day, everything changed. Miles thought for a long time that night. If Eleanor was pregnant, and if it was Robert's child, and if that child was a boy, everything would go to that child. The Caldwell title, the lands, the fortune, not to Miles. None of it to Miles. From that day on, his plan changed. He was no longer waiting. He was acting. He came one Thursday afternoon. Eleanor was in the garden. She went out to the garden every day now. She couldn't stay inside. Miles sat beside her. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm fine." "Really?" Eleanor looked at him. Miles lowered his voice. "Eleanor, I can see it. Are you pregnant?" Silence. Eleanor said nothing. Miles continued. "You don't have to say it. But if you are," he paused. "We need to talk." They talked that day. For a long time. Miles explained. Plain. Logical. Cold. But his voice was warm. He seemed concerned. "Think of a woman," he said. "Her fiancé is dead. She is pregnant. She will give birth to a child without a father." He paused. "You know what that means in London, Eleanor. What society will say. What your family will say. How that child will grow up." Eleanor's hands rested in her lap. She listened. "Robert is gone," Miles said. His voice softened. "But you are still here, and that child is still coming." He paused. "That child needs a name, a father, a home." Eleanor raised her head. "What are you saying?" Miles looked at her. "I am here," he said. I am Robert's closest relative. I can be a father to that child. I can be a home to you." He paused. "Marry me, Eleanor, for the child." Eleanor didn't answer that day. "I need to think," she said. Miles stood and left, but his words stayed. That night, Eleanor thought. She didn't like Miles. She never had. But why? Was it just a feeling? And Miles's words. A child without a father. Society. Family. They were all true. All real. Eleanor was pregnant. Robert was dead. And that child would be born. What would happen to that child? Her mother came to her that night. "Lord Miles spoke to me as well," she said carefully. "Eleanor, we have to think about the child." Eleanor looked at her. "You too?" Her mother took her hand. "My daughter, we live in a difficult world. That child needs a name." A week passed. Miles came again. This time, Eleanor's mother was in the room too. And this time, Miles spoke differently. He spoke about the Caldwell will. Technical. Legal. What would happen if Robert's child was not recognized? How the child's rights could be protected? And what would happen if they were not? Eleanor listened, and those words, those cold, technical, legal words, broke something inside her. That child's rights. What would happen if they weren't protected? Was it not true? Was it wrong? That evening, Eleanor made her decision. It was not the right decision. It did not come from her heart. But she saw no other way. She accepted. But understand this. As Eleanor accepted, something inside her screamed. No. Very quiet. Very deep. But it screamed. Eleanor did not want to hear that voice, because if she did, everything would become much harder. The engagement was decided. A date was set. And from that day on, every morning when Eleanor woke up, she looked in the mirror. Her face was blank. Her eyes were blank. Inside, she was something else. But no one asked about what was inside her. Meanwhile, far away, in a prisoner of war camp, Robert Ashby was alive. James was born in December. It was a cold night. Eleanor labored for a long time. Her mother was beside her. The midwife was there. By dawn, it was over. The midwife lifted the child and handed him to Eleanor. Eleanor looked. Small, red, eyes closed. And that face, that small, new face that knew nothing yet, looked like Robert. Eleanor's eyes filled. She didn't cry. She held him. But something happened inside her at that moment, deep in that dark, lonely, broken place. Something small lit up. This child was here. Robert was gone. But this child was here. James was a boy. When Miles heard the news, his face did not change. He congratulated Eleanor politely. He sent flowers. But that night, Miles sat for a long time. A boy. The Caldwell title. The lands. The fortune. All of it would pass to that child. If he were recognized. If one day it came before a court. The plan had changed. It was no longer enough to marry Eleanor. He had to control James as well. The first year passed. Eleanor raised James. Alone. Her mother helped, but the night wakings, the morning cries, carrying that small weight, those were all on Eleanor's shoulders. And Miles was there. He came every week. Every week he said the same thing. Different words, the same meaning. Robert is gone. James needs a father. I am here. Each time, Eleanor gave a short answer. I will think about it. But she didn't think about it, because that voice was still inside her. That voice that said no. One day, Miles came differently. He sat down. his face serious. "Eleanor, have you thought about James's future?" "I think about it every day." "No." Miles leaned forward. "Have you really thought about it? What will happen when he grows up? When he goes to school? When he enters society? When they ask who his father is? What will he say?" Eleanor said nothing. "The illegitimate child of a dead duke." Miles lowered his voice. "Let that not be his life, Eleanor." Eleanor looked at the table. "You don't have to decide today," Miles said as he stood. "But think. Think for James." He left. Eleanor stayed there. James was asleep in the next room. She could hear his breathing. Eleanor closed her eyes. The second year was harder. James grew. He began to walk. He began to speak. First words, first steps. Eleanor saw everything, carried everything, and the loneliness grew. Her mother fell ill, not severely, but enough. Eleanor cared for both James and her mother. Miles saw the opportunity. This time, he said something different. "I will begin legal proceedings," he said. His voice was flat now, not gentle, but real. "For James to receive the Caldwell title. But for that, my name must be there. Our marriage must be there." Eleanor looked at him. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Miles smiled. "I am telling you the truth. I can take care of James better than anyone. You know that." That night, Eleanor cried, for a long time, quietly, while James slept. Then she stood up, washed her face, and in the morning, she sent word to Miles. "All right, now I will tell you about someone else. Far away. Very far away." Robert Ashby was in a prisoner of war camp in the south of France, a small, cold, isolated place. He had been taken in 6 months earlier. He was wounded, thrown from a horse. His left arm had gone badly. In the first months, he only tried to recover. Then he thought about escape. Escaping the camp was not easy. He tried. Twice. Twice he was caught. He was punished. The third time, he thought differently. He would wait. He would wait for the right moment. And that moment came. At the end of a year, one night, in one chance, with 2 other men, he escaped. They walked. For days. In the cold, in hunger, in exhaustion. But Robert did not stop, because there was only one thing in his mind. Eleanor. Getting from France to England took time. Roads, ships, strangers. Robert did not say his name, because he was believed dead. And he did not want to explain yet. He wanted to see Eleanor first. He wanted to see her face. As he got closer to London, his steps quickened. One day, on a cold January morning, he entered the city. He heard the sound of it. Familiar sounds, familiar smells. And then, he ran into someone he knew, an old friend. The man froze when he saw him, turned pale. "Robert," he said, you're dead." "No," Robert said, "I'm not." The man was shaking. Tonight is Eleanor Vane's engagement. To Miles Ashby." Robert froze. "What?" "The engagement ceremony. At Ashby Manor. Tonight." Robert waited 1 second. Then he ran. That morning, Eleanor woke early. She didn't get out of bed right away. She stared at the ceiling. It was today. Today, she would become Miles Ashby's fiancée. She got up, washed her face, looked in the mirror. That face. 2 years of mourning, 2 years of carrying, 2 years in black. It was tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. James's voice came from the next room. He was awake. Eleanor went to him, picked him up, held that small weight. James smiled, as he did every morning, for no reason, purely. Eleanor smiled too, not forced. When she looked at James, she didn't have to force it. "Today is an important day," she said softly. James didn't understand, but she said it anyway. "To protect you." James placed his hand on Eleanor's face, a small, warm hand. Eleanor closed her eyes. In the afternoon, preparations began. The dress arrived, light blue, elegant. Miles had chosen it. Eleanor wore it, because she had to. Her hair was arranged, jewelry was placed. Eleanor looked in the mirror. From the outside, everything was right. She was beautiful, ready, like a bride-to-be. Inside, that voice was still there. That voice that said no. It had been there for years. She had tried to silence it. She couldn't. This is not right. She knew. But what could she do? By evening, the hall was full. The great hall of Ashby Manor. Candles, flowers, guests, familiar faces from London society. Everyone was there. Everyone was waiting. Eleanor came down the stairs. Miles was waiting below. Black suit, a smile, his hand extended. Eleanor gave him her hand. Her hand was cold. Did Miles notice? He didn't. Or he acted like he didn't. They entered the hall. The guests turned. Smiles, whispers, small bows. Eleanor walked straight. Her steps were steady. Her face was calm. Inside, she was something else. They reached the center of the hall. Stopped. Miles stood beside her. A priest was waiting for the engagement blessing. He began. Words came. Latin, English, mixed. Eleanor heard them, but did not listen. She heard the sound, but the meaning did not reach her, because there was another voice inside her. Robert. She thought of that name. She thought of that last morning. That wave. That promise. I will return. He didn't return. Or, Miles took the small box from his pocket, opened it. The ring shone in the candlelight. The hall fell silent. Miles turned to Eleanor, reached out his hand. Eleanor raised hers. Her fingers trembled, just a little, almost invisible. But they trembled. Miles held the ring, brought it toward her finger, and the door opened. It opened with a sharp sound. Someone had pushed it. Strong. Certain. The hall turned. A man stood in the doorway. He was pale. There were marks on his face. His clothes looked worn from travel, from exhaustion, from a long journey. His hair had grown long. His left arm held slightly different, the trace of an old injury. But those eyes, those dark, familiar. Eleanor froze. The ring stopped in the air. Miles's hand stopped in the air. The hall froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Because the man standing there was dead. Robert Ashby, the Duke of Caldwell, believed dead for 2 years, mourned for 2 years, grieved for 2 years. He was standing there. Robert looked around the hall. His eyes swept over everything. Fast, sharp, in a single glance. The guests, the candles, the priest, Miles, with the ring in his hand. And Eleanor. That look. What was in Robert's eyes? There was shock. Yes. A man believed dead. 2 years gone. And this. There was pain. Deep, sudden, like a knife. And there was anger. Robert took one step into the room. The hall was still silent. It felt as if no one was breathing. He looked at Miles. He looked at the ring. He looked at Eleanor, and Eleanor looked at him. 2 years. She had worn black for 2 years. She had cried for 2 years. Every morning for 2 years, she had thought of that last morning. That wave. That promise. I will come back. And now he was standing there, alive. Real. There. What happened inside Eleanor in that moment? Everything. Everything at once. Joy? Yes. But it could not rise to the surface, because there were other things underneath it. Heavy things. Shock. Fear. And how do I look to him right now? Beside Miles, the ring suspended in the air. Engagement night. What was Robert seeing? Robert did not take his eyes off Eleanor. His lips moved. He wanted to say something, but he didn't, because Miles spoke. Robert. His voice was startled, but there was something else underneath it. He was thinking quickly. How? Be quiet. Robert cut him off. He wasn't looking at Miles. He was looking at Eleanor. He took another step, entered the room. The guests moved aside, automatically, without realizing it. Robert stopped in front of Eleanor. There was one step between them. Eleanor looked up, looked into those eyes, and what she saw there was anger. 2 years, Robert said. His voice was low, controlled. But inside, he was burning. 2 years, he repeated. And you, the sentence stopped there. He did not finish it, because there were no words that could finish it. Eleanor wanted to say something. She wanted to say so many things. They told me you were dead. A paper came. Official. Sealed. Final. I cried. I wore black. Every night before sleep, I said your name. And then there was James, your son. And Miles came, and I. But nothing came out, because the hall was full. The guests were watching. The priest was watching. Miles was watching. And Robert was misunderstanding. Eleanor could see that. Robert turned. He looked at Miles. She was my fiancée, he said. His voice was ice. Miles took a step forward. Robert, let me explain. Get out. One word, but it was full of everything. Miles did not leave. Listen to me. Eleanor, get out of this house. A murmur ran through the room. The guests looked at each other. No one knew what to do. Eleanor was still standing there, frozen. Her feet felt fixed to the floor. Robert turned to her. One last time. Brief. Painful. And that look held everything. I waited for you. I thought of you for 2 years. And you? He did not say it, but Eleanor read it. Robert turned and walked toward the door. As he passed, he stopped. Without looking back, he spoke. 2 years, he said. That was all. Then he left. The door closed. The hall was silent. The candles were still burning. The flowers were still there. Miles was still standing there. That smile was still on his face. Forced now, but still there. Eleanor looked at him, and for the first time, in those long, exhausting, devastating 2 years, for the first time, the voice inside Eleanor rose loud and clear. This is your doing. You did this. Robert did not go to the manor that night. He walked through the streets of London for hours, without knowing where he was going. That scene kept turning inside him, again and again. Eleanor, Miles, the ring, 2 years. Morning came. Robert woke up in a hotel. He had not even noticed where he was when he went in. He had simply entered. He had lain down on the bed. He had not slept. He got up, washed his face, looked in the mirror. He was no longer the man who had left 2 years earlier. The prison camp had left its mark on his face, in his eyes, in that left arm. But the mark it had left inside him was deeper. That day, he found Eleanor. Not at Ashby Manor, at the small house where she stayed with her mother. Robert knew it. He knew without asking. He knocked on the door. Eleanor opened it. They looked at each other. Eleanor's face was pale. She had clearly not slept. Dark circles under her eyes, hair undone. She was still wearing her black dress from the night before. Robert stepped inside. No one had invited him, but he entered. They stood facing each other in the sitting room. Her mother was not there. She had seen, but stepped away. She was a smart woman. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Silence that belonged to both of them. Then Robert spoke. 2 years, he said. Eleanor waited. 2 years passed. I fought to come back. Every day. Every night. His voice was low, but inside he was burning. And when I returned, what did I see? Eleanor said nothing. Miles Ashby. Robert paused on the name. My cousin. And you. In that hall. With that ring. Robert, why? He stepped forward. Why, Eleanor? Couldn't you wait 1 more year? Were 2 years too much? Everything was inside Eleanor. Everything she wanted to say. Everything she wanted to explain. But how could she begin? Where would she start? They told me you were dead. The official notice came. There was a paper. And I was carrying your child. And Miles came. And how could she say those things? Which word could she start with? She stayed silent, and in that moment, the door opened. James ran in. He was 18 months old. He had only recently learned to walk. Fast, unsteady, bumping into everything. He saw Eleanor, laughed, and ran to her. Mama! Eleanor bent down, picked him up. And Robert. Robert froze. He looked at the child, small, brown-haired, smiling. And that face. That face. Robert knew that face. It was the face he saw in his mirror. The face he had seen in his father's portrait. The face he had seen in childhood photographs. It was an Ashby face. Who is this child? His voice came out flat, rough. Eleanor was holding James. The boy looked at Robert the way children look at strangers. Curious, fearless. Eleanor looked at Robert, and she said it. He is your son. Silence. Robert did not move. It felt as if he was no longer breathing. He looked at the child, at that small face, those Ashby eyes, that brown hair. Then he looked at Eleanor, then back at the child. And something happened in that moment. That hard, angry man, carrying 2 years inside him, broke for 1 second. Only for a moment. But he broke. James reached out his hand to Robert. Children do that. They reach for strangers without fear, without thinking. Robert looked at that hand. Small, soft, a hand that knew nothing yet. He bent down, and he took James's hand. Eleanor watched, and inside her, everything from those 2 years, grief, loneliness, fear, carrying it all, stopped for 1 second. She only looked at that scene. Robert and James, father and son, for the first time. Then there was a knock at the door. Miles stepped inside. Even though he knocked, he didn't wait for an answer. He never did. He moved through that house as if it already belonged to him, and he saw the scene. Robert, James, Eleanor. Miles's eyes assessed everything, fast, sharp. And then that smile appeared. The one always ready, always perfectly in place. "Robert," he said, his voice warm. "Thank God. When I heard you were alive, be quiet." Robert stood up. James was still there, now clinging to Eleanor, unsettled by the unfamiliar voice. Robert looked at Miles, and that look was different from the one he had given Eleanor. Colder, sharper, something inside him was no longer holding back. "What did you do?" Robert said. Miles looked surprised, or acted surprised. "Me? Robert, I helped Eleanor. It was a difficult time, that child." "What did you do?" Same tone, same cold edge. Miles took a step forward. "Tell me what you think I did. I am your cousin. I have always—" "Get out!" Miles stopped. "Leave this house, and stay away from Ashby Manor as well." Robert stepped closer. "I'm back, and I will be looking into certain things. Soon." Miles's smile didn't disappear, but his eyes changed. He was calculating. Fast. Quiet. "Of course," he said. "Of course, Robert. Rest. It's been a long journey." He turned. "Eleanor." He inclined his head. "We will speak again soon." He left. The door closed. Robert was still standing. Eleanor was holding James. Silence. Long. Heavy. A silence that carried everything inside it. Robert turned to Eleanor. The anger was still there. It hadn't gone. But something else was there now, too. After seeing James, after holding that small hand. "Tell me," he said. His voice was still hard. "Tell me everything." Eleanor set James down. The child ran toward his toy. Eleanor sat, and she began. She told him everything. The news of his death, the letter, the way it fell to the floor, learning she was pregnant, Miles's arrival, his words, his pressure, the way she had agreed. For James. Her voice trembled once. Just once. Then it steadied. Robert listened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't question. He just listened. When she finished, there was silence. James sat in a corner, playing with his toy, unaware of everything. Robert looked at the child. Then he looked at Eleanor. "Miles," he said. "Just the name." "Yes," Eleanor said. Robert stood up, walked to the window, looked outside. For a long time. Eleanor waited. Then Robert turned back. "I will handle this," he said. Eleanor looked at him. "How?" "I don't know yet." He paused. "But I will." That night, Robert sat alone, and he thought. Miles. That smile. Those calculating eyes. That, "Of course, Robert, rest." Something didn't fit. It hadn't fit for years. But now he was trying to understand. What exactly had Miles done? And why? The answer was there. Robert could feel it. By morning, he would begin to look. Robert woke early the next day, and he began. He wanted to know everything about Miles Ashby. He called his lawyer, an old, trusted man, the family's lawyer since Robert's father. The man cried when he saw Robert. Robert embraced him. Then they sat. "Miles," Robert said, "I want everything. Financial records, documents, anything related to the will." The lawyer looked at him. "Robert, everything." It took 3 days. The lawyer dug. Robert dug. And what they found. Miles had begun moving 2 years earlier. He had studied the Caldwell will, Robert's father's will. He had found a gap. Small. Technical. But enough. If Robert had no heir, Or if the heir was not recognized, Miles, as the closest male relative, would inherit everything. But James existed. If James were recognized, if Eleanor's child were recorded as the Caldwell heir, Miles's plan would collapse. That was why he wanted to marry Eleanor. If he married her, James would become his son. Not Caldwell, Ashby, and the Caldwell inheritance would pass to Miles. Robert looked at those documents for a long time. Something moved inside him. Was it anger? Yes, but something deeper, something more painful. I was in that camp. I was wounded. I was trying to come back. And this man was cornering Eleanor, and I blamed her. That day, he went to Eleanor. He knocked. Eleanor opened. She looked at him. Waited. Robert did not step inside. He stayed at the door. I was wrong, he said. Eleanor said nothing. I blamed you. I thought I understood what I saw in that hall, but I didn't. I didn't understand. He paused. His eyes did not leave hers. I know what Miles did now. I know everything. Silence. And you? His voice tightened for a moment. Then he continued. You carried those 2 years alone. You carried James alone. And when I returned, I wronged you. Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, looked at him. Yes, she said. You did. Robert lowered his head. I'm sorry. I know. It's not enough. No, Eleanor said. It isn't. Silence. Long. Real. Nothing softened it. Robert waited. Eleanor looked at him. Thought of those 2 years. That at her... those nights. The nights she cried with James in her arms. And now she saw him. Pale. Tired. Marked by the camp. Standing at her door. Apologizing. Not looking away. Come in, she said. When James saw him, he smiled. He remembered the stranger from the day before. Children do that. Robert bent down, looked at him. Hello, he said. James reached out his hand. Again. Robert took it. Again. Eleanor watched. And that weight of 2 years, the weight she carried every morning, every night, that weight lifted a little. Just a little. But it lifted. Miles collapsed that week. Robert acted with his lawyer. The documents went to court. Miles's plan, his attempt to manipulate the will, the pressure he had placed on Eleanor, everything came out. At first, Miles denied it. Then he tried to explain. I did it for Robert, for Eleanor, for the family. No one believed him, because the documents spoke. Miles Ashby had to leave London. Quietly. No one saw him off. That same week, James was officially recorded as the Caldwell heir. A small process. The lawyer, 2 witnesses, a document. James played with his toy, unaware of everything. As Robert signed the paper, he looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at him. Neither of them spoke, but everything was in that look. That evening, Eleanor went to her room. She opened the wardrobe. For 2 years, black dresses had hung there. Neat. Ordered. The color of mourning. Eleanor looked at them. For a long time. Then she reached out. Took one. Folded it. Set it aside. Another. Another. All of them. At the back of the wardrobe, there were other dresses. Old, faded, untouched for 2 years. A soft blue one. A pale green one. Eleanor reached for the blue. She took it. Held it. Her fingers felt the fabric. The next morning, when Robert knocked, Eleanor opened the door. She was wearing the blue dress. Robert looked. He said nothing, but his eyes did. Eleanor looked at him. "Come in." That morning, the three of them had breakfast together, at a small table. Simple food. James, as always, made noise, spilled things, dropped things, laughed. Robert laughed. Eleanor laughed. And that sound, the sound at that breakfast table, filled the house. Now let me tell you what came after, because the story does not end there. Robert and Eleanor were married that year. It was not a grand wedding. Small, quiet, only real people. Eleanor wore white after 2 years of black. Her mother cried. The good kind of crying. James didn't fully understand what was happening, but everyone was smiling, so he smiled too. They moved to Caldwell Manor, a large old house, empty for a long time. When Eleanor first walked in, she looked around. "We will live here," she said. Robert stood behind her. "How is it?" "Large," Eleanor said. "You'll get used to it." "Maybe." But she smiled. Small. Real. James grew up in Caldwell Manor. Those long corridors became his playground. The garden became his world. And Robert. Every morning, Robert woke up and looked at James. He never forgot that first day he held that small hand. Never. He learned how to be a father. Slowly. Sometimes making mistakes. But he learned. As James grew, he began to resemble Robert. Those eyes. That posture. Sometimes, when Eleanor saw it, something tightened inside her. Gently, in a good way. Eleanor never wore black again. The dresses she had set aside remained in the wardrobe, in one corner, untouched. Sometimes she looked at them, but she never wore them, because mourning had passed. It had taken a long time. No one knew how long, but it had passed. Miles never returned to London. No one looked for him. Years passed. When James turned 10, Robert taught him to ride. At 15, fencing. At 20. But that is another story. One evening, Eleanor sat in the garden. A late summer evening. The sun was setting. James was running in the garden. He had grown, but he still ran. Robert sat beside her. They both watched. "Are you well?" Robert asked. Eleanor thought. She really thought. "Yes," she said. "I am." And this time, it was true. She had worn black for 2 years. She had mourned for 2 years. She had carried it for 2 years. But that door had opened, and life, real life, had entered through it. It had come late, but it had come. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.